Good afternoon, this is Jeff at Sewer Tech Northwest. We are at property address 5935 Northeast 18th Avenue here in Portland, located down in the basement. I describe everything as if you are standing in the street facing the front door of the home, or the front of the house in general. We're dropping into a 3-inch, actually it's a 4-inch cast iron cleanout. Up above it's a 3-inch cast iron stack, but it looks like it swaps to 4-inch right as we drop onto the floor here. The water's running. We're going to zero out just inside the access point. Off we go. We'll see how the cast iron looks once the lining's drained out. Yeah, it feels like I'm going over a little bit of buildup potentially. Oh, got roots coming through the transition joint here. And under the water line there, and we'll mark this as we come out on the outside. And we are swapping to 6-inch pipe, but the cast iron there, we'll see how that looks. If it's built up, it can be, potentially cleaned out if necessary. Sometimes you get you'll get a hump in the flow line. It can often be cast iron scale building up over channeling. So we'll see how that looks. Gone past a root at every joint thus far in the concrete. But this too, we will see how it drains off. And as it relates to repairs these days, if you have good slope and grade still, you potentially have the makings for a trenchless update rather than doing a traditional. Alright, now we're transitioning here into clay pipe. Got a root intrusion at essentially every joint in the concrete pipe. Now we're into 6-inch clay, and typically speaking from this era, usually that transition happens at the street curb, sometimes at the right-of-way. When I go to locate here, we'll kill two birds with one stone. I'll pull back to the transition joint and locate there to see if any of the clay pipe still resides on property or not. There's our main connection there at 64 feet. We're going to let the line drain out here for a moment. We're going to do some locating here, and then we'll check the rest of it out as we come back in. That line is draining off still. We're going to pull back. The line will be fully drained by the time we look at all the pipe on property. You've got some little root nubbins getting out into the road there. I'm going to pull back in here just a little bit more here. Marked at the curb, but I was far enough past the curb there I couldn't get a proper depth. Alright, getting the depth here. I'm kind of tucked under a tree. It's a little awkward, but I'm getting a pretty consistent depth there, about 5 foot 11 to 6 feet deep. Now what I would highly recommend looking into here is it appears and we'll get a better shot here as we come back in. Stuff like this, like that right there, often, if you have the right equipment, I'm talking about epoxy lining anyway right now, which is trenchless repair system. That right there is a grout dam. You had another one out in the clay pipe, out in city responsibility, where someone put too much pipe grout in, creating a dam in the flow line. Realistically, you can probably epoxy line over the top of it, but I would suggest, you know, if you're going to epoxy line this thing, they do make some milling equipment that you can grind stuff like that down flat and smooth it out. That way you don't have a lump and a bump there in the flow line. Anyway, and I'm using green marking paint. You'll see that out there. All right, we're now at the front edge of the grass, about 6 foot 3 inches deep. Anyway, I'd recommend looking into all the different styles of repairs out there, whether it's trenchless lining, pipe bursting, all that stuff, to see which is going to be the most cost effective for you and make the most sense. But you do have good slope and grade throughout all the concrete pipe there, so it is a candidate. You'd have to obviously run a machine through here and hack all the roots out, and, you know, smooth out some grout dams there. Otherwise, you can do this thing without potentially digging a single hole. Sometimes you have to put an access point in, but you have to run that past the liner guys to see what they have to do here. Okay, this spot here, I'm not putting a paint marking down. It is underneath the bottom step of the stairs that lead up to the front door. And then in front of that, some decorative stone. So anyway, I took a photo of it. Where my locator, where the pistol grip handle of my locator is in the photo I took, that is where the transition is. Pretty much smack dab right underneath that bottommost step there. So from it, at minimum, from this point here to the end of homeowner responsibility, and whether you do a liner or a traditional type repair, one that requires digging or semi-trenchless, like pipe bursting, I highly, highly recommend you take that repair just past the curb, even if it's just 6 inches or so. Those transition joints, especially when you've got new pipe meeting old pipe, and even more so with the, you know, the fact that you've got street trees right there. You've got a tree right next to the line as it crosses the curb. They're the weakest joints in your sewer line to root intrusions. So if you take it right to the dividing line, if roots come through, sometimes it can be kind of a little bit of a to-do as to whose responsibility it is, you know, whether it's the city's or homeowner's responsibility. So if you can take the liner and or the repair in general just past the curb, if that does ever happen, it undoubtedly is doing it in city responsibility. And I'll go back and review the video for the exact foot count there at the curb. So we do have some level of scale buildup in the flow line. It's not outrageous. In fact, it's a little less thick there than I thought it was when we first ran the camera out. So, you know, in the process of cleaning the line, you could always jet the line out and strip that off there, but I'm not seeing a lot of obvious signs of heavy channeling going on in the flow line or anything like that. But you can often get a rust layer over the top of stuff, and until you strip it off, you can't see what's underneath it. But generally speaking, when you've got a lot of scale built up over the top of a channel in the pipe, that's where cast iron gets slowly but surely eaten away over time. Sometimes you'll have just an obvious trough or channel in the flow line. In some cases, scale will build up over the top of it where you kind of obscures your view of it until you jet that stuff out. But I'm not seeing obvious signs of that. There's just a little scale there. Usually it's much more aggressive looking. It was hard to tell there at first when the water was running, but it's a lot more concerning when you get a very obvious rounded hump going down the middle of the flow line. That's your obvious sign that scale is building up over the top of a channel. This case, it looks like this light duty scale buildup. No obvious heavy deterioration there in the flow line at all. So anyway, the stuff that I'd recommend update on here is all of the concrete pipe and or potentially any clay or little bit of it that could be on property still. In general, I recommend an update from the cast iron to concrete transition all the way to the end of homeowner's responsibility, which is the face of the curb. Again, ideally take it just past the face of the curb. And then I highly recommend a rescope afterwards to check the work. Whether it's a trenchless style repair, do that after everything's cured up. If you do any kind of digging, a more traditional type repair, You want to make sure the rescope takes place after the trenches are closed. Otherwise, you're not going to catch or see any settling problems that can occur during the installation.